Welcome to the Energy Show. I'm journalist Markham Hislop, and today's guest is Professor Duane Bratt, political scientist at Mount Royal University. We're going to be talking about the First Ministers Conference yesterday in Saskatoon. Welcome to the Energy Show, Duane.
Happy to be here, Markham.
Give us an overview, because of course, Prime Minister Mark Carney met with Danielle Smith and oil executives in Calgary on Sunday. Uh, how did that play into the First Ministers meeting on Sunday in Saskatoon?
Well, there's been a number of meetings and a setup for yesterday's meeting in Saskatoon. So the first thing that Mark Carney did after he established the meeting is he gave marching orders to the premiers, show up with proposals around infrastructure that are in the national interest. Then we had the Western premiers meet about 2 weeks ago in Yellowknife, where they also dissected this project and how they were going to deal. So they had sort of a subcommittee meeting to move forward. And then Carney is in Calgary on Sunday, dealing with several dozen senior oil executives, and then met with the premier. So he realizes that of the premiers, Danielle Smith is the big stumbling block. She's the one that needs to be appeased. And so having these pre-meetings, I think, set the stage for yesterday in Saskatoon, which by all accounts seemed to be a very successful set of meetings. But the devil is going to be in the details.
Danielle Smith went on her radio show on Sunday and she said, look, I talked to Prime Minister Carney. He didn't say that we were going to do a pipeline, but he said we're going to be doing conventional oil and gas or conventional energy. That means oil and gas. And he said, we're going to get this energy to market. That means pipelines. And she said, I'm paraphrasing here, of course. She
Yeah.
said, I'm drawing the obvious inference. And I made the same point in a video yesterday. I said, he's all but promised her a pipeline.
In fact, in his closing statements, Carney highlighted several projects, two pipelines in particular. One through Churchill. That's a whole sort of massive project around rebuilding the port, the railway, but also a pipeline, as well as revisiting some similarity to Northern Gateway. The BC government, David Eby was not there. He was in a previously scheduled tour of Asia. But his deputy premier repeated the same thing Eby did at the Western Premiers meeting, which says, well, there is no project, so we don't have a comment. Bear in mind, the BC government did not support Trans Mountain at all. And Eby was the point man on John Horgan to fight it. They lost that fight. I have a feeling BC will lose this fight as well. If there's a battle between Alberta and BC, I think you're going to see Carney come on the side of Alberta on this, and they're going to. And they're not, it's not just about the politics; it's also about the economics. The question is, how many laws are going to have to be changed by this? Obviously, they would have to replace the tanker ban. But I don't think they're going to touch all of Smith's 9 demands. If you read the Prime Minister's statement, he's still talking about decarbonization. That sounds like an emissions cap. They may be putting money into carbon capture and storage, but I think he's going to hold that. Then the question will be to Smith, well, if you get this pipeline, you get that pipeline, and these changes, but you're still going to have an issue around plastics. You're still going to have an issue around emissions. What do you do then? Do you declare this a victory of your negotiating strategy? Or you say, no, we had 9 demands. Where are those 9 demands?
I want to make a point because back in 2016, 2017, I covered Trans Mountain expansion, and I read a lot of National Energy Board reports. And one of the things that I don't think Canadians understand is the National Energy Regulator acts as a superior court. It acts as the agency of record for for Parliament in
Yeah.
regulating energy. And it, on 2 occasions, it issued decisions as a superior court in which it confirmed the paramountcy of the federal government over interprovincial pipelines.
Yeah.
Done. And I think that you're absolutely correct that Carney has a legal leg to stand on, and Eby has already seen BC lose on this. So that might
Well,
be,
and they fought it in the courts and they lost it in the
yeah,
courts as well. And the Constitution's pretty clear because this covers issues that go beyond one province. Smith keeps citing the Constitution. I don't think she really understands the Constitution, quite frankly, um, because when you talk about Bill C-69, um, anything that deals with multiple provinces is in the domain of the federal government.
yeah.
You can have as many pipelines as you want within the province of Alberta, and the feds have no say in this. So, on one hand, they want federal government involvement to build pipelines, but they don't want federal government involvement to stop a pipeline.
Question for you. There's a lot of talk in the Prime Minister's official statement about infrastructure development. And, there's a whole list here. Highways, railways, ports, airports, pipelines, nuclear projects, electricity transmission systems. I mean, this seems to be, when he talks about nation building, it's rebuilding the nation's infrastructure.
Oh, absolutely. And there's a moment in time where he can now deliver on this. You have a brand new a prime minister whose background is in economics. You're dealing with a extraordinary threat from the United States. And so as a result, this is why I think the meeting was successful. And he is going to be able to get a lot of things done, but he has to move quickly on these things. And so it sounds like this law that they're going to bring in would supersede all pre-existing laws for those projects of national importance, however they want to be defined. And so the way I see that is, do they involve more than one province? Do they have great economic benefits to Canada? And do they help diversify our trade away from the United States? And that's where the pipelines play a role. That's where perhaps nuclear plays a role because it covers multiple provinces. We'll have to see if Tim Houston's idea of sort of a wind west electricity grid, that's something that environmentalists have been asking for, is electricity grids across provinces. So I think there is an opportunity here. Now, there has been criticism by both the environmentalists, that this meeting was in Saskatoon. Saskatchewan's in the middle of a provincial emergency over forest fires, as is Manitoba, as is Northern Alberta. And these are getting worse and worse. And I think there's a direct link to climate change. And so how do you reconcile those things? That's going to be tough to do. I think the other is around Indigenous rights, although in the statement, not necessarily in the press conference, in the statement, there's a lot on Indigenous rights. And there were Indigenous leaders in the room. They were not Indigenous chiefs, but Wab Kinew is a pretty popular and pretty powerful premier who is Indigenous. You had the Nunavut premier as well. And there are pro-energy Indigenous people in Parliament from multiple parties. And so I think that deflects some of the Indigenous challenges, but we'll have to see how that plays itself out.
I read the Prime Minister's statement, and climate isn't mentioned once, which seems rather extraordinary given his background in climate finance.
There is talk about decarbonization and net zero, though, in the statement.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. The
Yeah.
word climate was not mentioned. I have a question for you, and this is related to Smith's demands around regulatory rollback, some of
Yeah.
which you mentioned. And there's been a lot of talk that Canada is now being perceived as a company or a country that can't build things, and a
Yeah.
lot of it has to do with regulatory uncertainty and regulatory blockage, if you will. And I wonder if Carney, being a banker, is in these kinds of meetings sending a message to the finance community. We're going to take care of your issues because we need your private capital to build all this stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And, the BC government came out and said, well, there's no proponent, there's no pipeline on the list. Well, yeah, until there's regulatory change. And so I think that's coming. And it is clear that that is a signal to the investment community. Even Trans Mountain, which now I think we're very grateful for, was a very arduous process. It cost way too much. It took way too long. That's not necessarily because the government took it over. All they simply did was take the ownership of an existing company. But I think it shows some of the regulatory challenges that they're going to try to diminish.
Um, the number of oil CEOs, both pipeline and oil companies, sent a March 19th letter to the to the political leaders.
Yeah.
They then revised that and sent it with a larger group of CEOs and sent it to the prime minister. And one of the things they demanded was legal, not just legal certainty. They wanted pipelines to be a legal requirement. And I don't know what that means, actually. I don't think it has any standing in
Yeah.
law. And declaring something of a national interest actually doesn't have any standing in law either. But the message they were sending was, you come with emergency powers or something to run roughshod over opposition, or we're not going to do this.
Yeah, and I don't think that's what we're going to see here, right? Carney is talking about streamlining it down to 2 years. That's not emergency powers ramming it through. And the Conservatives were mischievous in Parliament yesterday. They were standing up and going, "We need you to approve a pipeline right now, right now." Which pipeline? Which project? Show us the details. So, they knew what the answer was when they asked the question. They just wanted it on the news clips, and it made the news clips. I think what they're going to outline is a series of regulations to go through, and that it will be a federal step. They'll say, you're not going through provincial approvals, you're going through our approvals because it crosses provincial boundaries. And so, what is that legislation going to look like? I don't know. That's what they're going to be working on, but they better do it fast. And I would expect, I don't know if it'll pass before the House sits, but I expect that they will at least table it or have a first reading or a framework by Canada Day before the House sits, and then the full debate will occur in the fall. There's no way you could ram through something as significant as this, in a day and a half. Right, it's going to take some time to write it up, and they're going to have to learn from the mistakes of Bill C-69, which also came about because of challenges prior to Bill C-69, as well as the court cases that led them to say that some of this is unconstitutional. So there's going to be a lot of work in there. I'm interested to see how Carney controls some of the other elements of his caucus. In particular, Stephen Guilbeault, who has no portfolio anywhere near this, but that hasn't stopped him from talking before. And so politically, how does that play? And also politically, how does this play for Danielle Smith? Is she interested in a policy win, in a significant policy win? Or is her political career based on fighting Ottawa? Does she walk away and say, well, we didn't get a pipeline built in the last 6 months, and even though they've addressed 5 of our 9 demands, they haven't addressed all 9. And oh, by the way, I've discovered these other ones over here. So what does she do, especially in an atmosphere of forthcoming referendum on separatism?
Donald Trump's was a backdrop to all of these, and Prime Minister Carney mentioned it in his statement. Even though in some ways Trump has backed off, he's backed off on some of the tariffs, especially around energy.
Not steel and aluminum.
No, that's true, but right, okay. But we're talking about the Alberta context here.
Yeah.
So, is Trump going to fade as a boogeyman here or is he going to remain front and center?
He is going to remain front and center because you don't know what he is going to say tomorrow. And we've seen that, right? So he threatens the EU with a bunch of tariffs, then he backs down, then he threatens Apple, then he kind of backs down, then he tweets out, we're going to have 50% tariffs on steel and aluminum. And so because of his erratic nature, that's going to remain a problem. And he is unifying Canadians. And he is pushing Canadians. So even if he goes silent, I think the betrayal that we have faced, the realization we cannot trust the United States anymore. Not just trust the Trump administration, but he's not doing this solo. He's got a lot of supporters saying the same sort of things, that they're going to have to take this into account. So the other driver, I think, is Carney has talked about expanding the military. He has talked about increasing border security. That's going to take some money, and therefore you need these projects. And so, while he's still talking about net zero and he's still talking about decarbonization, I think the economy is leading him. And he is a banker after all.
What about Northern and Arctic investments and Arctic security? That seems to have popped up on the radar with increasing frequency lately.
Yeah, so I've written on ballistic missile defense in the past, and I am very skeptical about all of this sort of stuff. I know he is in love with the Iron Dome in Israel, doesn't understand the geography of the United States and North America compared to Israel. We go back to the strategic defense initiatives of Reagan, 40 years ago. So I think Carney is being cagey here and says, yeah, well, we'll talk, and just Trump will move on to something else. But this idea that we're going to commit tens of billions of dollars, in the next 6 months, just isn't going to happen. I think he's placating Trump on something really easy to do. We've already made deals with the Australians around greater radar installations. But this full package that Trump is talking about, I just don't think that is there.
Right, I would agree. The Golden Dome seems to be one of those fleeting things that comes in and out of the Donald Trump, out of the Oval Office. But is it not true that there has been a lot of talk about beefing up Arctic sovereignty because
Absolutely. Yeah.
that seems to be the thrust of Carney's comments.
Oh, yeah. And you can combine that with national security and economic security. And I think those go hand in hand. We talk a lot about northern sovereignty, but a lot of that is lip service, and so I think we do have to put greater commitments in there, and I think this crosses party lines as well.
Great, Duane. Thank you very much for this. Very always appreciate your insights.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thanks for watching the show. We are on a mission to reach 10,000 subscribers and over 1 million views. If you're enjoying the content, give us a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for being part of our community.